Welcome, welcome. This is Carol Moulton, and I'd like to welcome you once again into Tea Time with Carol. I hope that this week finds you well and sane, and because we're living in a crazy world and these are crazy times, so I'm really not being facetious. Um, I was on a website recently that where people are looking for coaches, and I have never seen so many people looking for coaches because of the amount of stress that they're experiencing in their lives right now. I mean, it's a huge uptick that I'm seeing, and I'm sure other coaches are seeing that as well. But I hope that life is treating you well. I hope that God is shining upon you and blessing you in extraordinary ways. Um, want to talk to you. This is March. We've been celebrating Women's History Month, and I have been finding it so interesting finding women who have done extraordinary things under extraordinary circumstances, and nobody has been telling their story. And so I feel like it's my duty to shine a light on some of these women. So last time we talked about hats and women who had created really significant kinds of things in the industry, including one that's local to me, Miss Vanilla Bean, and that's a real name too, by the way. And some of the other women that we've talked about in the past, Julia Chin, who was born a slave and married a white man and ran his plantation, was considered his wife, and did a lot of entertaining, significant social entertaining, even though her station in life was a slave. And she had two daughters, one of whom married a Mr. Pence in Indiana. Would love to know if there's a relationship there. But anyway, I'm pouring coffee today. We need strong stuff. I think we need something a little stronger than tea. So I'm pouring coffee today. I've got some bold coffee from Starbucks. I kid you not. And we're pouring that. We've fluffed up the pillows, and this is the last one for March. But if you all indicate that you're interested, I will continue to do research and bringing light to these hidden gems of women who've done really significant kinds of things, and nobody really talks about it. We really don't know. And I would hate to see these women lost to history, altogether. So I feel like it's my job to keep this going. So the first one, hope that everybody's okay. Come on in. Pillows are fluffed. Coffee is poured. Come on in. Get comfy. First one I want to talk about. I know you all are familiar with Rosa Parks. She's celebrated, as well she should. But what you may not know is that there were several women who did the same thing before Rosa Parks. And we're going to talk about three of them today. Two of them I'm going to talk about really briefly, and we're going to spend most of our time on the last one. Just because she did a lot of really significant things. But anyway, I digress. The first one, before 9 months before the first one, her name is Claudette Colvin, and she was a 15-year-old high school student in Montgomery, Alabama, same place, and she was on her way home from high school. She was riding a bus. This is March 2nd, 1955, and she was told to give up her seat. She refused, saying she paid for her fare and the Constitution protected her from having to give up her seat. A sister or friend was familiar with the Constitution. She was in high school, but she knew her rights. She was arrested, and she became the main witness in a lawsuit called Browder versus Gale, which did end up ending segregation in public transportation in Alabama. Now, of course, people ignored the fact that that law was there, that the law saying you had to give up your seat for a white person was overturned. But nonetheless, she challenged it. She won, and there should be some note in history regarding her courage at 15. Really can't get over that. Is I don't know at 15 if I was that aware of anything, really, to tell you the truth. But before Miss Colvin and before Miss Rosa Parks, there was Irene Morgan Kirkcaldy, and she refused. She was on a bus in Virginia, and she was arrested for not giving up her bus seat for a white passenger. She was convicted in county circuit court, and she appealed to the Virginia Supreme Court, and later she went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, here's what's interesting on her case. She was helped by NAACP attorneys, including Thurgood Marshall. I'm sure you're familiar with that name. Thurgood Marshall, of course, became the first black justice in the United States Supreme Court. And sidebar here, side note, when I was in law school, some of my study partners and I decided that it was historically significant for us to go to the Supreme Court one day and watch him on the bench. So we went, the three or four of us went together this particular day to watch arguments before the Supreme Court. And we're delighted that he took the bench that day and we were able to see him. And the case was really, really interesting. It was a father who was suing his ex-wife because she had remarried a black man, and he was afraid that the child might become bullied. And Justice Marshall really made fun. I mean, it was great sport for him. He did not take the case seriously at all. And he kind of tortured the attorney who was presenting the case, because the attorney kept trying to rely on what was in his brief. You have to submit briefs, before the court. And he kept saying, well, Justice Marshall, I don't even think he referred to him properly. He said, if you refer to page such and such on the brief, it'll tell you blah, blah, blah. And Justice Marshall kept saying, yeah, I've read your brief. You got anything else? You got anything else? Because I've read that, and that's really not doing it for me. And we all were kind of chuckling and saying, well, we'll never go before him that unprepared. We won't do that. But it was amazing to watch how prepared he was, how prepared they all were, how familiar they were with the writing. And the fact that they had given him, I think they just wanted to hear the argument because it was a novel idea. But, naturally, you can't present a case based on what might happen. That just doesn't cut it. So then anyway, that was my side note, and that was my one and only occasion to see Justice Marshall, Thurgood Marshall, in action. And I was impressed forever. And that just renewed our commitment to law school, because some days it was kind of hard. But glad that we all stuck with it, and all of us are doing well now. But anyway, that was my side note. Anyway, going back to Irene Morgan Kirkcaldy, she did win the case. Justice Marshall did, well, this was Attorney Marshall at the time, did win the case. This was in 1946. And she was recognized by President Bill Clinton in 2001, where she got the Presidential Citizens Medal of Freedom. So those are two ladies who, two warriors, two significant women who, before Rosa Parks, and that's not to take anything away from her, but, the way history tells the story, it's almost like, Rosa invented this, that nobody was doing this kind of resistance before she came along, and it's significant to note that there were others who also challenged the system in the same way. Now, the third one, you know, let me tell you about this lady. The more I read about her, the more in love with her I fall. You know, I had heard her name. I was kind of familiar. You know, she's one of the names that does get trotted out during Black History Month, but I don't know if we really know the significance of all the things that she did. Um, Her name is Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells. And she married a man. She had a lot of sort of very handsome woman, very, very attractive woman, and she had a lot of suitors, and she married a man when she was about 33. He was an attorney and working the same kind of things that she did regarding, you know, civil rights and all that. But they kind of flipped the script, and she went out and did a lot of speech writing, and he stayed home and took care of the children. Although I think he still practiced and everything. But let me just tell you about her background and what she was about, because I see such parallels between her and what's going on today. And I think we all need to be Ida B. Wells champions, you know, because of what she stood for and how she was able to overcome so much. You know, not just in terms of her speaking out, but, you know, and her dealing with the black-white issue, but also the male-female issue, because I think a lot of her non-recognition had to do with men who were threatened by her. You know, example, she was one of the co-founders of the NAACP. Oh, but it was a man who took her name off and failed to give her the proper recognition, you know, for that. So let me just give you her backstory. Ida B. Wells was born a slave at the end of, she was born at the end of, right before the Emancipation, 6 months before the Emancipation Proclamation. She was born in 1862. And she, you know, well, couple of things. There are like 50 things going through my head at the same time because there's so much that I want to share with you about her. Growing up, she was one of a number. Her parents were both slaves. They were on the same plantation. They hadn't been separated, and she was sent to her grandmother's at one point. I don't remember why. But during the time that she was gone, her parents and her sister, one of her siblings, died from yellow fever. Apparently, what just went throughout the entire county. And she was in Tennessee at the time, I believe. I believe that's where she was from. Yeah, Tennessee. And so, but before that, she had been allowed to learn to read and write, and she spent a lot of time with her father. This is after Emancipation Proclamation. Her parents stayed at the plantation, and they continued to work. The man that they had been enslaved by now had to pay them. But her parents were very, very proud of her accomplishments. And even though a number of them could not read and write, she read to them, and they just enjoyed that. And so she was able to listen to a lot of the slave stories and the things that her parents and other folks had gone through. So, you know, I think that may have had a lot to do with the burning that she had to oppose the systemic racism that she encountered throughout her life. She became a huge speaker against lynching, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But anyway, she bought a railroad ticket to a whites only car, and when they told her that she had to move, she said no, she had the ticket and she wasn't moving anywhere. So they arrested her, and she, did file. She opposed it, and she did lose her case. It went all the way before the Tennessee Supreme Court, but she lost. Um, at 16, her parents died, as I mentioned, from the yellow fever, and she went to work so that she could take care of the rest of her siblings. She had to kind of disguise herself to look older because she really was underage to teach. Um, but she did that, and she was able to take care of her siblings and keep them all together. And she taught school. She taught school. And later on, she was so incensed by the things that were going on. She became a newspaper reporter, and even to this day, reporters use a lot of her techniques. She went across the country documenting the lynchings, and she, in very specific detail, talked about the things that were going on in lynching, the things, and it wasn't just black men that were being lynched. It was women, it was children, it was just anybody. If she found things like, if a black man owned a store and became too successful, he was subject to being lynched. Or frequently there were accusations that a black man had raped a white woman. Well, she investigated and found out that it was really consensual sex that was going on between them. And when white men heard about it, they called it rape in order to justify what they were doing. So she was the leading voice against lynching. And this continued, on and on and on and on, without stopping. I mean, they're just, if I read a speech that she gave in 1900, where she talked about some of the specifics of some of the lynchings, and it's not so different from today. It's just, especially right now, there's so much going on, and it's not just black folks that are being targeted. It's also Asian American Pacific Islander folks are being targeted also. And I think a couple of things. One, I think it's time out for us to stop viewing them, and I'm talking about Asian Americans. Black folks and Asians have had sometimes a rather difficult relationship. What I've heard a lot of black folks discuss is the difficulty with people who seem to come to this country and are able to get businesses and move up economically very easily, when it's not so easy for black folks. And I think there are reasons for that, and I don't think that it's as easy as it looks, and I don't think that, that's the entire story. But I think that we're both being targeted because there's a common enemy, and the enemy is not a person, it's not a race, it is a system that thrives on keeping certain folks down in order to rise. It's a system that thrives on generating fear and creating a fear that bubbles throughout this country, so that we are not looked upon as people. We are not looked upon as human. We're looked upon as something to be extinguished in order that the system continues to thrive, with white people on top and everybody else on the bottom. If this is too strong for some folks, sorry, not sorry. But that's just the way I see it. And until we all decide that this is not what this country was founded on, these are not the words that that the Constitution means so much more than um, than this. There's no unwritten law in the Constitution that says it's okay to do this, this kind of thing. But I think it's significant. I want to read from you, and I know it's a horrible thing to read to somebody, but just a little teeny bit of the words of Ida, Miss Wells, when she gave a speech in 1900. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it because I think it parallels what's going on today. Now, here we are, so many years later, so many years later, and we're right at the same point. This is January 1900. She gave a speech in Chicago, and this is how she opened. I'm going to read you the open, and I'm going to read you the closing. Our country's national crime is lynching. It is not the creature of an hour, the sudden outburst of uncontrolled fury, or the unspeakable brutality of an insane mob. It represents the cool, calculating deliberation of intelligent people who openly avow that there is an unwritten law, quote, that justifies them in putting human beings to death without complaint under oath, without trial by jury, without opportunity to make defense, and without right of appeal. The unwritten law first found excuse with the rough, rugged, and determined man who left the civilized centers of eastern states to seek for quick returns in the gold fields of the far west. Following an uncertain pursuit of continually eluding fortune, they dared the savagery of the Indians, the hardships of mountain travel, and the constant terror of border state outlaws. And she goes on to talk about how all of that was tolerated, for them to get what they wanted. And they felt like there was this unwritten law that justified lynching, in many different instances. This was kind of making it up as you go to justify it. So, and the way she ends it, I think is also significant. This is the ending. Although lynchings have steadily increased in number and barbarity during the last 20 years, 200, there has been no single effort put forth by the many moral and philanthropic forces of the country to put a stop to this wholesale slaughter. Indeed, the silence and seeming condemnation growing more marked as the years go by. A few months ago, the conscience of this country was shocked because after a 2-week trial, a French judicial tribunal pronounced Captain Dreyfus guilty. And yet, in our own land and under our own flag, the writer can give day and detail of 1,000 men, women, and children who during the last 6 years were put to death without trial before any tribunal on earth. Humiliating indeed, but altogether unanswerable, was the reply of the French press to our protests. Stop your lynchings at home before you send your protests abroad. And isn't that the key? This country is always ready, willing, and able to jump into another country's mess when there is this deafening silence to deal with the mess right here at home. The silence is deafening. Nobody is really speaking out. You've got Asian people who are being assaulted just out of the blue. They're minding their business. They're in the store, just walking down the street, and someone comes along and just 6 women, and that's another whole subject when we talk about sex workers. I'll deal with that in another in another story, in another at another time. But here we are. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? It's really time out for this kind of wholesale execution. And the reason that I think Ida resonates with me so much is that she came along at a time when Reconstruction was flourishing. She saw black men being elected to Congress, black men being able to own businesses, black men being able to do well economically. And then along comes Jim Crow and says, no, y'all moving too fast. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. You're doing better than some of these white folks out here. This ain't right. And so she saw justice, 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 injustice. And isn't that where we are right now? A lot of us grew up during the civil rights era. We saw, people black folks being able to accumulate vast amounts of wealth, being able to move up into not just being an attorney, but being a judge and being elected or appointed to very high offices. We saw all these laws being passed that allowed black folks to really move up economically and socially. We've done very well. And so we're at the very same point that she was at, in 1900. Justice, 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 injustice. We're back at the very same place. And so, I just want you to think about this for a while. She spent the rest of her life writing and speaking out against the lynching. She traveled the country, she researched, she talked to people, she wrote about it, she organized. She spent her life dedicated. She wrote books, as a matter of fact, too. She was an editor of a newspaper. She was really out there. I admire her so much. And so I think that she is the one that we can look to as a guide as to what's next. We can't be comfortable and passive in watching the things that are going on right now. We've got to be active in our speaking out, in our, if you don't know an Asian person, it's time for you to know one and befriend one and ask them, how can I help? There are more parallels than not. We're told this song and dance that, it's very easy for Asian folks to come in to this country and, they do well. But if you really look at the numbers, that's really not true. Yes, there are some at the top of the food chain because this country needs the credentials that they have. But if you look at folks from poorer countries like the Philippines and from Vietnam, there are not a lot of those folks who are being admitted into this country. Anyway, we all can reach across the aisle and do more than we're doing right now. We can have conversations in our groups. We can invite other people in. We can go out of our way to be uncomfortable, get comfortable with being uncomfortable in having these conversations with people other than yourself, people that look like you. So I'm asking all of us to do that, to have real conversations outside of your comfort zone and start really making a difference. Start really listening to where people are. Listen to the fear. Listen to the trepidation. Listen to where they are right now. And see how you can make a difference. How we all can make a difference. So I'm getting off of my soapbox now. I think that I think that's enough for one day. Ida B. Wells, Irene Morgan Kilcoty, and Claudette Colvin are the three women that it's important that we not lose them to the dustbin of history. It's important that we tell their stories and that we continue to reach out and celebrate each other and celebrate who we are and celebrate those differences. It's okay. Being different is okay. It's okay. So I pray that God richly bless you in the coming week, that I've said something that you find of some significance or some import, and hope that things go well for you moving forward. Things are kind of loosening up a little bit. I was able to go and have dinner with a friend of mine this past week, and that was the first time in, oh God, almost a year. Good Lord. So that was very, very nice. I haven't been able to do that in a while. And I hope that wherever you are, that you just remember everything you want is on the other side of fear. So until next time, this is Carol Moulton praying God's blessing on you. And be good, be kind to yourself. Do something for you this week. All right. Until then, until next time, I love you. Be blessed. Take care. Bye bye.